Well, as we've already covered, for democracy to thrive and for politicians and all people to participate fully in their government, you first have to feel safe and not have the fear of violence. So NDI works historically with political leaders around the world. And what we've realized over the past few years is that this new emerging threat of digital violence is the #1 barrier that we're seeing to people participating in political life. And to our knowledge, in more than 50 countries in which we work, we've anecdotally talked to women around the world, this is the #1 attack that women in particular are facing, not just on the issues that they address, but their looks, their abilities as a mother, their sexuality. In fact, not one woman in public life that we've talked to can claim an abuse-free digital experience, not one in the entire democratic world. So what that tells us is that this isn't a woman problem, this is a democracy problem. And what they often hear in these attacks is that it's not physical, right? So it's not that big of a deal. And that it's the price you pay for being in the political arena. That's not just things women are told, that's things women tell themselves. And what we then see is that that sentiment is weaponized to diminish entire classes of people from participating in political life. Because traditional gender tropes are manipulated, false and misleading information is piled on top, and what we end up seeing is that women who are leading the edge on resisting strongman regimes are smeared because they are just simply trying to present a future that's more inclusive and more democratic. Threats of rape by anonymous trolls chasing after a pesky journalist who is onto a story, those threats are not just directed at that journalist. It's meant to silence women in general from participating in the political process. It's deployed globally by authoritarian actors because it works. We know that women are put off by going into public life because they see what other women are experiencing and and decide to not participate. If you're a member of a minority population, if you're a woman of color, if you're a young woman, if you have diverse sexual orientation or a different gender identity, it's even worse. But in the words of our patron saint of digital Sherlocks, Madeleine Albright, and the patron saint of NDI, this is a solvable problem. And we have reasons to be worried optimists. Because ending the structural drivers of online violence against women is in fact a solvable problem. And here, as we're talking about contested realities and connected futures, just a few hours ago, we met with a group of technologists, experts from around the world, and we came together to come up with some ideas that we could really work together to implement going forward to change this fundamental problem once and for all. So over the past year, we've been doing this work. We've talked to 90 women in politics at 7 different roundtables, or 7 different roundtables we held in different countries. We looked at 26 different interventions in the field of government, civil society, and technology companies. One thing I will point out is that of that population, just 16% of the women that we interviewed and talked to said that they felt like technology companies and the government had been responsive when they had been attacked. So we've got a lot of work to do, and what we also know is that what we're trying to do is fix this not just in New York, here in Brussels, or in Washington. What we're trying to do is fix it in Georgia, Mexico, Taiwan, Nicaragua, and all of those women participated in this. Over the course of the next few weeks, NDI will be sharing a lot of our findings. We'll share these and some additional statistics of what we heard and the path forward. But what I want to do here today is welcome up a number of women who helped us through this process to not talk about the challenges we face, but to talk about the solutions available to us. Because NDI really does believe that if we can address online violence against women, it will be a game changer for democracy. And in this year of action, that's really what we're committed to. So I'd love to welcome my panelists up to come and talk to us. So joining me as they take the stage is Amalia Toledo. She is an independent expert from Colombia who examines how technology development and policy can impact and benefit human rights and gender equality. We're also joined by Nagat Dad. Nagat is the founder and executive director of the Digital Rights Foundation, a nonprofit working on digital freedoms in Pakistan. She is also a member of the Facebook Oversight Board. And Tracy Chow. Tracy is an entrepreneur and software engineer known for advocating for diversity and inclusion in tech. She is currently the founder and CEO of Block Party, which all of you should go download right now if you haven't already, because everyone in this room needs it. And she is also the co-founder of Project Include, a nonprofit working to create a tech ecosystem where everyone has a chance to succeed. Finally, we're happy to welcome Helena Molgaard Hansen, who is the Deputy Tech Ambassador in Denmark's Office of Technology in Silicon Valley. So thank you all for being here. We're looking forward to a great conversation. And I want to start with I want to start by bringing us into the real world and start with Amalia. So I just gave you a little bit of the theoretical concepts behind this, but Colombia, where you're from, is in the middle of an election, and some of these gender dynamics are really at play in the current situation. So can you talk a little bit about that, and then also tell us what you think about this issue and what we need to do to address it?
Yeah, a few clarifications. I live in Colombia.
Oh, sorry.
I'm not Colombian. I'm from Puerto Rico. I've been living in Colombia for the past 10 years. Another clarification, it wasn't in my bio. I asked not to add it in my bio because I'm not speaking here on behalf of Wikimedia Foundation, but I know that the agenda says that I'm part of Wikimedia Foundation, and I am, but I'm also a researcher on gender and tech issues. I've been working on this since 2014, focusing my work on Colombia and the Latin American region. So with those clarifications, now I can go to the answers and to my answers. Well, Colombia right now is, since the beginning of the year, there have been election campaigns for the elections, on the legislative, and now on the presidency. And it is clear that doesn't matter where you are in the political spectrum, if you are a woman in politics, you will receive a lot of violence online. And this is clear in Colombia. We have seen it. But it's also clear that not everyone receives the same amount of violence. There are some factors there that also plays a role in here. If you are a woman in politics that are questioning the status quo, the patriarchal system and the different oppression system, then you will get a lot more violence than if you go with the win, you know? And just as an example, right now, we have two, for the runoff of the second round for the presidency, we have two women that are vice president candidate. The two women are black, are Afro-descendant. It's the first time that this is happening in Colombia, but the differences are huge from these two women. One is urban, one comes from the academia, has a PhD, has a very valuable professional and academic experience. The other one is from the rural area. She used to be a domestic worker. She was a teen mother. She is an activist on environmental issues. And she is the embodiment of feminism, Afrofeminism right now in Colombia. And she claims that, and she presents herself as someone that is very proud of her Afro-descendant roots. And she is all that the politics is not. You know, she comes from very humble background, and she had made herself very much the symbolism in the country of a new way of doing politics in Colombia. And she has received, I cannot tell you how much hate, attacks, violence, death threats. as any other woman in the country. She has received so many, and it's because of she's challenging absolutely everything. She's challenging who can be in politics. She's challenging that politics that has prevailed in Colombia forever with the conflict. She is also from an area in the country that still live in the conflict, in the armed conflict. And she's a displaced woman, and I can keep telling you how many other boxes you can tick with her. And she is being subject to so much violence because she's challenging all the status quo that is prevailing. And people are not, they don't know how to deal with that. And not only society as a whole, but then government doesn't know how to deal with that. And then platforms, of course, have no idea how to deal with that as well. And it's so sad because I've been working on this for quite some time. Nida también, and as well, sorry, I mixed the Spanish here. Sorry. And so many other people are working on this, and we'll be researching, speaking about this, and we still don't see big changes here. So I'll leave it there, and maybe we can have more discussion later.
And I apologize for the mistakes of the moderator. I probably made many more. But Nagat, if you could pick up where Amalia left off, you also focus a lot, just for our audience to understand, on the legislative changes, on some, and the double-edged sword there as well.
Yeah. So I think a lot of conversation that I have heard here during the last 2 days, there has been a lot of talk about regulations, and it's so important to contextualize when we propose, while sitting in Western democracies where rule of law is strong, think about the jurisdictions where the same regulations that Western democracies, global North, propose here, sort of, our governments replicate those laws and then weaponize against the activists, journalists, human rights defenders. And we have a case study in Pakistan where in 2016, a Prevention of Electronic Crimes Act was enacted in the name of protecting women and girls against online harassment. And the same law has been weaponized and abused against journalists, women human rights defenders, and the women who spoke up in the Me Too movement. So we have lessons learned there, and honestly, it scares me when I hear all the conversation around regulation here in the Europe, and I'm like, oh, all right, so Pakistan or India or Nepal or Bangladesh will be like, oh, so Western democracies are doing it, why can't we? And that's the justification that they give it to us, who are on the ground and who are raising voice. So we have seen the regulations are not always the answer. But I'm not an anti-regulation. What I'm saying is that I think we really need to take in account the global, trends and see what we are doing in one jurisdiction will have an impact in other jurisdictions with bad governments, bad rule of law, and oppressive regimes.
Well, we're going to talk about that in a minute. I'm going to switch now over to tech. Right? Because Tracy, you have a perspective on this. We like to think that tech is a dumpster fire, but there are innovators who are creating tools, and we like to name and fame here. So we wanted to give you an opportunity to talk about not just the product, but also what inspires you and where you see the market value here.
I'll start first with a little bit of my personal story and then how that led into working on Block Party. So I've done a lot of work around diversity and inclusion activism in the tech industry, which has then drawn a lot of online harassment, not surprisingly. And so I've been on the receiving end of this sort of gendered violence, targeted harassment, stalking, had to experience the psychological harms and this trauma. And I've also gone through the very frustrating experience of trying to report to platforms and getting no response, and then having to appeal to my friends who worked at the platforms, and then getting a response then, but being even more frustrated that I could have special access, which is the way that it works now. Like, you know somebody, you can get something done. Having had the perspective of working at platforms as well as an engineer, I worked at Pinterest, I worked at Facebook, I worked at Google. I also understand how things work from the inside and what are the incentives of the platforms. And I think one of the biggest issues in trying to advocate for change with these tech platforms is the people who have never worked there are trying to propose things that would never make sense from inside. As an engineer who has actually had to go through like tech leading a project and defining product, I understand more of these constraints a bit better. And so coming to work on Block Party, which does automatic filtering, provides people with mass blocking tools, just gives people more control of their online experience. It's this third-party solution that sits nicely on top of other platforms and solves for things with a different incentive. If you look at the big platform companies, their motivation, their business incentive, their whole reason for existence is to monetize that engagement and growth. Safety will never be their number one priority. It can be a third or fourth priority, a 10th priority. It's never going to be the number one priority. For another company like Block Party, our entire focus is safety, so we can solve much more for that end user, centering the experience of people who are experiencing harms. So the way Block Party works, and again, like looking at that experience of having to deal with some of these harms, where in the past people would just say like, well, ignore the trolls or just mute and block them, or why can't you just report? The harm is already done by the point that you can go and mute and block. Like you've already had to look at it. And so one of the things we're doing with the automatic filtering is making it so you don't have to see that by default. We sort it into another folder that you can go review later, if and when you want to, if you need to have situational awareness of good things, legitimate questions from constituents if you're a politician, or if you need to be aware of the downsides of somebody making real threats against you. Like just pretending this stuff doesn't exist is also not a solution. But we can filter it out so you don't have to deal with it real time. One of the other insights we had was so much of platform design right now puts the entire burden on the person receiving the abuse. So say you can report, it's like, sure, when 4,000 trolls descended on my Reddit AMA, I did not want to go report each of these 4,000 one by one. It is possible for other people to help if the platforms are designed in such a way that they are not right now. One of the things we built in Block Party is a helper function where you can delegate access to other people that you trust to review content for you. It's less traumatizing for someone to review this content when it's not directed at them. Still not pleasant, but much less painful than when it's something targeted specifically at you. So you can delegate access to other people to take action for you. There's automatic evidence collection because we're storing it all in this folder, which is another issue that we've run across with reporting. I've also been through the process of having to go to the police multiple times to file reports. It's traumatizing and re-traumatizing to have to go collect all the evidence. It's very painful. Oftentimes people will just want to delete everything because it's so difficult to look at, but then you remove the evidence record. And so we're doing automatic collection of this, which makes it a lot easier. And other functions like a watch list function, so that if you need to keep an eye on somebody who's persistently harassing you, like that's there for you as well. Some of our newer features allow you to take more preemptive action. So if you want to mass block all the people who've liked a tweet that is harassing you, like you can just preemptively block all that. Or if people kind of out themselves as being obnoxious by liking or retweeting a particular tweet, preemptively block all those people so they can't engage with you. So it's a form of setting much stronger boundaries. Obviously, I know with politicians there can be other considerations around whether or not you can block people from a public account. That's why muting exists as well, so you can filter the notifications. But we also know there are cases where people will block anyways because there's so much abusive behavior from someone that it requires a block. As long as you've documented that and can defend it, that's also fine. So we have documentation for block reasons to make that a bit easier. So really trying to center this experience of the people who are receiving the harm. The broader version of what we've built on top of Twitter right now is these like third-party tools that exist on top of all platforms. And this is one place where I think regulation can help. A platform like Twitter is very open, and they have these APIs or application programming interfaces to allow other developers to build tools like what we built with Block Party. Other platforms, and specifically Facebook, Instagram, the Meta-owned platforms, are not very open, which makes it difficult for researchers to understand what's happening, difficult to hold platforms to account, and it's impossible almost for anybody else to build solutions. There's still some ways to try to work around it with Chrome extensions or like other technical hacks, but it's a lot more difficult than if the platforms are forced to open up and enable third-party developers. if you think about app stores like Apple's and Google's, they're so much richer for third-party developers being able to build applications on them. If we were limited only to what Apple and Google would build themselves, whether it's like the weather app, the timer app, and then that's it, it's just not that useful. And right now, with safety tooling, we're kind of restricted by what the platforms themselves are willing to build in most cases. I think Twitter is leading the way. There's a lot more that Twitter can do, but the fact that they are so open to allow Block Party and they're so supportive of us, I think is a good template that other platforms can follow. If they don't want to follow or move in this direction because they don't see it as a business incentive, then this is where regulation can actually force a level of openness to enable more safety tooling. And I think this will also address some of the issues around in different markets, a lack of prioritization, because the platforms themselves are never going to spend as many resources in all these different countries as they do in the United States or these major markets. Distributing that access around developers can enable people in different markets and different countries to build their own solutions.
Thank you very much for, everyone, get blockchain app, now. But I want to turn, because you really made some great points about where regulation can help level that playing field in a lot of different ways. So, Helena, I wanted to turn to you to talk about what governments can do and what is happening right now.
Yes, thank you, Maura. And it's fantastic to be on this panel with all of you. I think it's really evident from the stories that we heard that this takes place everywhere. It doesn't matter whether you're based in Colombia, Pakistan, or Denmark, where I am from. We were seeing the exact same challenges. There has been some recognition of it, and increasingly so, I would say. But nevertheless, it's a problem that exists that we need to address. And the Danish government, to this end, launched the Tech for Democracy initiative last year, which was in response to the Biden administration's Summit for Democracy, really trying to create a platform where tech meets with, oh, can you hear me? Oh, you still can, that's great. To make tech work for democracy and human rights, as opposed to against it. We've seen the dark side, some might say, and how new technologies can be used against human rights, and we really want to create some emphasis on that and put together some momentum to address these challenges. So specifically, we have the Copenhagen Pledge that everyone can sign on to. The key word here is multi-stakeholder approach. It's really something that we believe strongly in. So we need participation from everyone, civil society organizations, private sector, academia, and everyone is welcome to join the course. We have a line of action coalitions, which are multi-stakeholder partnerships. And I will tell you a bit more about that after, specifically one of them. And finally, we're creating a funding facility that will be launched later this year to really address and to strengthen this area and bringing together all the people that had the knowledge. Because from a Danish perspective, we do think regulation is an important tool in this space, but we need to do it the right way. How do we do it the right way? Well, then we need inputs from everyone. Industry, civil society, governments alike.
Well, do you want to hit your last point and tell us a little bit about an exciting development and one that many of us are working on in this space?
Yeah, sure. I would be happy to. So I mentioned the action coalitions. One specifically that we have launched together with the US is the global partnership for action on gender-based online harassment and abuse. And within this action coalition, we work together to address online gender-based violence and to protect women and girls online, to really strengthen them. The partnership has 3 strategic objectives for now. And let me also say this is work that we're still formalizing the specific objectives, but what we have identified so far as the needs, and this has been challenged early on the roundtable this morning, which is excellent, that's why we're here, is first and foremost to develop shared principles, Second is to increase targeted programming and resources in this field. And finally, to expand reliable, comparable data, because we do think that these things are missing, and the access to it. Now, we heard from the industry at the roundtable this morning that lots of things are happening in this space right now, which is fantastic. We want to put it together and just really set some speed on the process, right? Because it's a problem, as we mentioned, that exists. Even though we're aware of it, it still exists. How do we tackle this? We need to do this now. So, we have an advisory board as part of this Action Coalition, and this is where we would love for everyone to come with inputs. So if you have any ideas, please see this as an open invitation for everyone to join in. We would love to get all your inputs and insights. So it's really open, and it's led by Denmark and the US, as I mentioned, and then we have other countries on board, Australia, Canada, Kenya is there together with the UK as well. So that was my fast speech. I don't want to take all the time, of course.
And that's great. And I have to say, this has been a labor of love for a very long time at NDI. My colleague Sandra Pepera has been leading this work for a number of years at NDI. And what we really thought this year is that we're catching the wave of a more positive approach to this and really looking at the solutions. We were kind of done with telling everyone what a big problem it was. So now that we've all accepted it's a problem, let's move on to solution. And on that front, I would really love to just get a sense from the panel. One of the great things about this process is we identified solutions in the government space, in the tech space, and within civil society. And I'd love to get a sense from you as to like, what's the one that wakes you up? And it's like, if we could do that, that would make a huge difference, and that would be something we can mobilize behind. We asked this question of a lot of different women around the world, so we'll get kind of a representative sample. Before you do that, I just want to also say at the outset, I tried to make it clear, but I'm going to clarify it even more. We all take the approach that if we can make the world, this digital space, better for 50% of the global population, we are opening the door to really learn more about how we do that for marginalized groups, be they disabled organizations and representatives of politically active people in the disabilities community and minority populations, and to make it truly the inclusive internet that we want. But I want to start. Anyone want to jump in with like what's the one that jumped out at you? Maybe even Nagat in your roundtable. What jumped out at you?
Yeah. So I would like to talk about two solutions. One, which was endorsed by the Pakistani women who were at the roundtable. And as I mentioned about the regulation, there was a lot of opposition against a new law, and a lot of suggestions around amending the current one that we have. But at the same time, there was a concern in terms of trusting law enforcement and the government bodies, the way they have reacted in the last couple of years. So we have a cyber harassment helpline. It's a local solution, right? So we started in 2016, where a woman from all over Pakistan can call us if they are facing cyber harassment on online violence. And then we provide them digital security advice, legal advice, and mental well-being counseling. So this has been really, really successful. And I would like to talk about the global solution that I'm part of. So I'm a member of oversight board of Meta, and I know there are like lots of sort of concerns around such a solution by the company, but I think being part of the board for the last more than 2 years, I feel that the kind of decisions that we have made and the recommendations that we have given, 108 recommendations, and those recommendations are binding on the company. So it's the board which sort of looks into the content moderation decision of Facebook and Instagram. So the recommendations that we have given, what we have seen in our reports that we have released, the partially implementing or the fully implementing rate of those recommendations are 64%. So at least we are seeing success. And I think this is one of the first self-regulatory model of a company that I'm being part of. And I think this is one kind of solution that the other companies can look into. There is no one solution to address online violence against women. We all need to play our role as a civil society, as companies, governments, and legislature, and also the Global North organizations. One thing that it's very close to my heart, we talk about Global South a lot, and I would like to say we are not Global South, we are global majority. And it's so important. It's so important when we talk about, it's a lot of labor that we women activists do on the ground. But when it comes to sharing resources, we are always left behind because the way our governments behave, the way we have regulatory repressive models, and the way we cannot get those resources. So I think something that maybe Helena can look into, that when the Western democracies join hands together to address some solution, don't leave us behind, because we are the ones who are doing the work on the ground.
Amalia or Tracy?
Yeah, I am very excited about being able to build technical solutions for a problem that has maybe not been created by technology originally, but definitely amplified. It's not as if politicians in the past didn't get heckled or receive abuse, but what's possible now at digital scale, consumer web scale, is that all these people can pile on. And so whereas before you might have had a square full of people mad at you, heckling you, now it can be thousands, millions of people coming at you online. And so when the problems are at this scale, the solutions also have to be, at least some of the solutions have to be at this scale. And what we're doing with Block Party is very exciting to me as like one version of this, like starting to automate things using technology to defend against some of these attack vectors. The thing that I really want to keep harping on is we need technology platform companies like Meta to open up much more so that we can continue building these solutions. What's happening right now with some of these platforms is they'll say like, okay, we hear you. It's a priority, but not a priority because we have many other priorities. And we're not going to build these things. But we'll also not allow anybody else to build anything. And then we end up getting stuck where there are people who actually want to build solutions and can't because the platforms have locked down. And so the fact that some platforms are starting to move in this direction, Twitter is one, Twitch and Discord, they have these moderation APIs that allow people to more programmatically control their spaces and define safety for themselves, is very encouraging. But I think regulation can move us along much faster.
Well, and Amalia, I think also your perspective on how this impacts democracy, right? And how we sort of use it as the game changer to make a difference on that front.
This is, at the end of the day, this is a social problem, so no one is going to solve this alone. We need to join together and try to work on thinking how we can improve the online space for women and many other people that cannot be there safely. But one thing definitely coming from a region that is with such disparity as well, I always think about Central America, how Central America is so forgotten from funding, from platform, from everyone, and there are people there, there are activists there doing a lot of work, very important work, putting themselves on the line of defending whoever is having a bad situation online on platforms with very little resources or no resources at all. They don't get to be heard by the platforms, and when they reach out to the platforms, they feel like they're not listening to me, I don't get any answer from them, and that's important, just to be present in these other communities, in this other country that maybe is not your market, but the problem is still there. It's happening there, and they need to be present as well there, because it's a huge problem there. At the same time, I think that we need to hold people accountable, also the politicians and our governments. One good news maybe to share is last week in Colombia, a court decided that political parties and political movements are responsible to sanction their members when violence occurs toward others, opponents or opposition. Particularly, the case is framed with women journalists that complain that doesn't matter where the political spectrum of the political party, they were getting a lot of online harassment and nothing was happening. No one was saying anything. So the decision is basically saying to political parties and also to the National Electoral Commission, you have to work on this because this is perversive for women. This is not, it has an effect in democracy as well. So this is one good decision that we have. We have still to see how it's enforced, but at least we have a course saying, recognizing how big the problem of gender-based violence online is, and how political parties are also responsible for that.
Absolutely. I want to, we're running really short on time, so I want to take questions, but maybe take two and then let our panel kind of answer them and wrap up. Does anyone have a question? If not, I think we have one. I can kind of read it. Let's see. Death threats are illegal in the same jurisdictions. Okay, so I think we're talking a little bit about, oh, thank you for that. What do you see for identity and managing harassment online? Does opening up more third-party developers also increase the chance of risky features and tools? So, right, I think in both cases what we're talking about is the challenge that we have here is that, one, we have to bring these three entities together to work together. Two, every environment is different, right? Some places legislation works, other places it absolutely does not. And some tech solutions help, but they come at a cost, right? We even heard about Twitter's new adaptation today, added 8 questions from 4, but it's a better system. So which do you, we're making choices and we're still learning. I guess I'd open it up to the panel and see if you guys have any comments on either of these two questions.
I'm happy to talk about this third-party developer question around the potential of risky features and tools. We're always looking at trade-offs in all of these tools we build. Even for platform native features, if you think about some anti-harassment controls, they often then trade off misinformation or other things. So for example, Twitter has a feature to allow you to limit replies, which can really cut down on harassment, but often that is also the space that people fact-check misinformation. Facebook has tools to allow you to block certain keywords, which is very good for blocking certain types of harassment, but it also can be used for censoring discussion around particular topics that you don't care about. So all of these things come with trade-offs. Even for some of the anti-abuse tooling we're building for Block Party, we have to consider that it can be abused, and past implementations of things like shared block lists have been abused, where certain people were kind of snuck onto these lists that got widely disseminated, and then they were locked out of all the conversation. So it is important to think about all of these potential ways in which even anti-abuse tools can be abused. I don't think that means we don't build them. I think that means we are more thoughtful about what can happen, what are the mitigations. One misconception people often have around APIs and opening up platforms is assuming that it's all or nothing. It is also possible to open up selectively things like muting and blocking and reporting, which will maybe not be as damaging on the front if they're not allowing people to automatically post or friend people on your behalf. But it's more around defensive measures that can't be automated. The other question was around the role of identity in abuse, and is it important that we consider identity for trying to create consequences. And the question I think was talking about in different jurisdictions, it is illegal to issue death threats. I would call out that there's a difference between consequences on a platform and consequences offline in certain jurisdictions. So you don't necessarily need to unveil somebody's identity to restrict their access on the platform so they can't post anymore, or they don't get distribution through the algorithms that are recommending their content. So there are other types of consequences that can be created on the platform side. And then we can also talk about what it translates to in the offline world. I think there are a lot of risks in being able to unmask people. And again, this is one of those things where it can go either way. Like there are activists or dissidents who really need to have anonymity.
Yeah.
And so allowing law enforcement to be able to ask for the unmasking is actually very dangerous in different regimes. And I think there's often this false link between identity or lack of identity online and bad behavior. Plenty of people do bad things under their real names.
Yeah.
So just saying that, like, we're going to associate your real identity to you does not mean it's going to make harassment go away. And trying to remove anonymity can have a lot of other very negative consequences.
Any last words before I sort of wrap it up? I know we didn't have as much time for questions, but everyone is here. Like I said, NDI is going to be sharing a lot of these interventions that we've been working on. Before we wrap, I just have one more announcement, and that's because, we all got here, we spent a year doing this. I'd like to thank my colleagues who helped on that. I mentioned Sandra, but I'd also like to mention Kaylee Schwabe, who's sitting right up here in front and doesn't know that I know it's her birthday today. So if you'd all join me on 3 in wishing Kaylee a happy birthday. 1, 2, 3. Happy birthday. So like I said, I'd just like to thank our panelists again for joining us, and please look forward to much more great work from all of them, and thank you all for joining us in addressing this solvable problem for democracy.